a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. We want to thank you for being here this evening. I want to thank our mods, Teresa M., Maui Girl, and Mimi J2. You're the best. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here on behalf of Suzanne, for her. And we've got a lot to cover tonight. We want to thank everybody, obviously, for taking your time out this unscheduled live, but I think it's necessary. I had the great privilege of being on, Nancy Grace's show, and we talked about this. So if you get a chance, go watch her stuff today. But, as I was thinking about when the autopsy report came out, as I read through it and I started to process that, and then I reflected on my experiences working these types of cases, domestic. And I had to think to myself, here's a beautiful soul, a beautiful human being. And it comes down to now 4 pieces of paper in relationship to what her life was about in the form of an autopsy report. And yet, there are other individuals who are putting statements out. I know her sister hasn't said anything. Her brother hasn't said anything. Her stepbrother hasn't said anything. I talked to Tommy yesterday because they're looking for justice and they're looking for truth, no matter what. But her ex-husband, who was having an affair on her, let's never forget that, released a statement through his attorneys, and I want to read that. Through the attorneys, it says, for the past 4 years, the Morphews have agonized over Suzanne's disappearance. This includes not only the pain, loss of their wife and mother, but also the false accusations of prosecution of Barry Morphew. The Morphews have prayed the authorities would remove their blinders and not only find Suzanne, but find the suspect responsible for her disappearance and murder. However, the Morphews are left with more questions than answers and a lack of justice for Suzanne, the family, and the community. On May 10th, around 5 a.m., Barry Morphew went to work driving approximately 160 miles north of the Morphew home for a job that he had been planning for months. In 2020, investigators confirmed that Suzanne was a regular morning coffee drinker, and DNA testing done in 2020 confirmed that the half-finished cup of coffee left on the kitchen counter on May 10th, 2020 was covered in her DNA only. The autopsy now also confirms that on the day she disappeared, Suzanne had her morning cup of coffee, as shown by the caffeine in the toxicology report. The autopsy also confirms that she put on her mountain bike clothes and was either getting ready for or was ready on her morning bike ride when she was abducted, allegedly drugged, and buried 50 miles south of their home. Despite the fact that the unknown male DNA was found in Suzanne's car, where her bike was parked, on her bike grips, handlebars, and bike seat, the authorities will not tell the Morphew family whether Suzanne's bike clothes, collected 7 months ago with her remains, have been tested for DNA. DNA left on her clothing by the murderer could bring justice for Suzanne, her family, and the community. The authorities will also not provide the Morphews any information regarding whether they have performed any testing on the bullet that was collected with Suzanne's remains. The authorities offered the victims, Barry, Mallory, and Macy, the option to retrieve Suzanne's remains. But they want to ensure the suspect is apprehended before they take what could be an important piece of evidence in the suspect's prosecution. The family is quite skeptical about the integrity of the investigation, as the very same investigators that concealed the unknown male DNA continue to be involved in this investigation and were present at the autopsy of Suzanne Morphew. The family asks for privacy and implores the authorities to look at the case with fresh eyes, follow all leads, conduct all forensic testing, and solve Suzanne's murder. I agree with that last statement. So let's look at it with fresh eyes, excluding a cup of coffee. Let's take a look at what we now know as evidence. And what we're going to talk about tonight is many, many years of experience. I've been involved in this from day one. And I met with Andy, the family, and tried to make sense of what was going on at that time. And what's really interesting, as this has progressed, there was this belief that this day would never come. And that apparently Suzanne was in Mexico somewhere. And there were many people that circled the wagons. And when the prosecution case fell apart, after a judge refused to let 14 experts testify initially, and then, of course, the DA, her behavior, as that thing spun out of control, that left the prosecution with basically just 2 experts. And as a result of that, they had to dismiss without prejudice. And here we are today reading an autopsy report, and the exact same people that filed civil lawsuits are still criticizing the fact that Suzanne's remains have now been found. So let's take a look at what the evidence will show in a court of law. Now, for some, it's going to be hard to want to believe what we're reading. Others, it won't matter. What we have to recognize is this report now comes into evidence, and there are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doctors that have placed their names on this report and whose reputations will now come under scrutiny over a cup of coffee. So what's the final diagnosis here? Many of you have already seen it. Many of you haven't. So I'm going to read it for you. The homicide by unspecific means, meaning in the setting of butorphanol, azaperone, and medetomidine intoxication. What's that mean? Well, if you look at all 3 of those chemicals, it spells BAM. B-A-M. And the homicide by means in the setting, somehow this chemical was induced into her body. And so now we've got to go over and say, what the heck is BAM? Well, this is BAM. It's a deer tranquilizer. And if we go here, all 3 of these chemicals are listed exactly as all 3 of these chemicals found in her blood, or excuse me, in her bone marrow. That's evidence. You don't need the DNA yet. That's BAM. Barry A. Morphew. BAM. Allegedly. And now we're going to learn a couple other things here. Down here in D, it says no indication of perimortem trauma. See forensic anthropology report. You know what that means? That means perimortem trauma means that's when the bones were in their softest sense in lay terminology, meaning the bones were extremely soft. And so typically, if you had a knife, a gun, or some type of instrument that struck those bones, you could see the indication, usually through like a chip or a scratch or something in the bone, that would show that that item hit. Kind of like the bullet found at the crime scene, meaning secondary crime scene. There are 2, maybe more. At least 2. This is the body dump. And what that means is what the doctor said in D, no indication of perimortem trauma, meaning there's no indication that she was stabbed in these bones. There was no indication that she was shot in these bones. So the bullet, we then have to ask ourselves, what would be the source and the purpose of that bullet? And we don't know the caliber. We don't know if it's, tied to any guns. It's not the projectile based on what the report's saying. They're saying one weathered bullet. Okay. So she had that with her remains. But here's something that is also very interesting. So they reported history of recovery of partial skeleton. Partial skeleton. That's important. A medical port. Why is that important? We'll talk about that. But what a medical port is, when you are receiving chemotherapy down here in line G, which the doctor pointed out, for lymphoma, this port would have been on her body. And that will probably end up being down here, this purple medical device. The envelope contained a dirt-covered purple medical port. That could become very significant, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. B, positive dental identification at time of autopsy examination. So they had a forensic odontologist there who positively matched her teeth, typically through x-rays that they obtain to her dentist. And then C, reported history. Decedent was reported missing in Chaffee County 5/10/2020. Must we never remember or forget that was Mother's Day. Mother's Day. And her bicycle and helmet were discovered without significant damage in separate locations within the county. Why is that important? Because there is no indication on the bones of trauma. And that's why D is so important. So if this was a bike wreck, if this was somebody taken by a mountain lion, if this was somebody taken by a registered RSO, and that individual took her life somehow, well, that individual has access to BAM. And then we get into the postmortem toxicology of a femoral bone identified, and they talk about where they pulled the chemicals. This is very significant because it's the top of the femoral, the leg bone. And the way they secreted that is they removed it, they cut the top off, and then they put it through a process, and they removed all three of these chemicals. Positive DNA identification, right and left femorals, meaning they pulled those bones and they got positive DNA that this is Suzanne Morphew. Clinical history, decedent was receiving maintenance for chemotherapy after complete remission of lymphoma. Based upon the information provided to me at the time of this report, it's my opinion that Suzanne Morphew, and there are 5 opinions here, they all signed it. Not 1, 5. Suzanne Morphew, a 52-year-old adult white female, died as a result of homicide by unspecific means in the setting of these 3 drugs. And it was enough or intoxication to take her life. These drugs are marketed as a compound injectable chemical immobilizer for wildlife, providing pharmaceutically reversible sedation and immobilization. If more information becomes available, this report will be amended. So what does that mean? It means there is no doubt that 5 doctors have declared, and here is the signatures again, have declared that she died from a deer tranquilizer called BAM. So now let's put our investigative hats on and ask ourselves, who has BAM? Who in the world has BAM? Well, we'll get to that. But let's keep looking here for a couple of clues. So the family or the lawyers in the statement, and by the way, they had this before anybody else because they're next to kin. And so they've had a chance to really think through what they're going to put out into the environment. And the statement that I read criticized the officers and that they're worried about tunnel vision for the investigation. And one other really interesting thing is they put north, that he went north, which is interesting because her body was found south. So our investigative thought process would be, good move. Because if this was let's say the RSO who jumps in her Range Rover, takes her off the bike with some kind of chemical, throws her in the car, he turned north too to throw her helmet out and her phone, but then he forgot he was going north, so he turned around and he went south. And he went about 50 miles away and buried her body. So that means he had a shovel. You got to be, an RSO who's interested in just one thing, that's sexual assault and attacking. But he was prepared. Even Ted Bundy didn't carry a shovel. But apparently this guy did. So when they get the body, here's the forensic odontologist, Kim Look. The decedent is initially identified as a Jane Doe because that's how she came in. But how did she come in? She came in 3 large paper bags containing bones, 7 brown paper bags containing clothing, and 7 envelopes containing items to be described. Suzanne Morphew, on Mother's Day, disappears, and she reappears, sadly, in 3 large paper bags. The skeletal remains are submitted in 3 bags labeled Jane Doe R17, Day 1, Jane Doe R17, Day 1 skull, Jane Doe R17, Day 2 and 3. So this was a 3-day archaeological dig and process. And so that means they sifted everything in that dirt. And that's how you do it. You take buckets or a shovel, and you have a sifter with a team. And everything that can be found is collected. And those items that are collected are then placed in those paper bags. But here's something interesting. The 3 bags contained multiple human and non-human bones and fragments. Now I thought to myself, why in the world would there be non-human bones? Which is, what other type of bones are there then? Well, that means they're animal. Or they could be animal. But either way, they're non-human, but they are bones. Why in the world would there be animal bones near her gravesite or in her gravesite? Well, as I got thinking about that, I remember a case that I had years ago who was buried. And the animal activity around that grave was almost instantaneous within a couple of days. In fact, that's how we found her. Animal activity, ants, coyotes. Isn't it interesting, though, in that particular area where these has a reputation as kind of a dump site for carcasses. Now, here's a thought. What if you put a dead elk on top of a grave? Well, that means the animals themselves are going to come right to that food source almost instantaneously. And as a result of that, there's a high probability there's not going to be a need to continue to dig in. And so the question that I've had in my mind reading this is, did he utilize, or whoever utilize, an animal carcass to throw off the actual scent of a deceased human? He's basically, the person that's doing this is thinking through where to bury a human body, and he chooses an area where animals and animal carcasses are discarded. We'll see how that unfolds. But the other side of this is submitted human bones, and the doctor, mentions them all here: sternum, right scapula, right, left femoral, right, tibia, etc., and vertebrae. None of the bones bear any residual soft tissue, i.e., they're bones, they're bleached bones, or obviously they're not bleached, but because they weren't in the sun, but they're just bones. And they talk about the head bone, and there they retain it for toxicology. You know what I'm not seeing here at this point? Hands and feet. I'm not reading anything in this report yet that says they found her hands and they found her feet. And now we get to this purple medical device. This was found in the grave. It's a port. It's a medical port. And here's an interesting point here. The brown paper bag, it remains in the custody of CBI, and in there is a pale baklava, which basically is a face mask, the same kind that is seen in the suspect at 1122 King. It's a face mask. A pink and light-colored leather work glove, a light-colored partial padded bra, a ripped dark blue-gray hooded sweatshirt labeled Crest Butte, a torn green Nike tank top, Yeti shorts, and a fabric fragment. The clothing and fabric fragments are all weathered and covered in dirt. All paper bags were labeled respective to their contents. Now, this is important because what this could indicate is the suspect, I guess they forgot to say that Suzanne used to wear a face mask while riding her bicycle, or at least getting ready for it. But according to that picture that surfaced around the world, then I didn't see her in a face mask. However, whoever put her in that gravesite felt it was important to also put that face mask and a light-colored leather work glove into that grave. Now, it could be a bike glove, probably not, because they call it a work glove. And 5 doctors with an MD, you would hope they would know the difference, because succinct thought process is really important right now. Is really important. And now we get into 6 envelopes remain in the custody of CBI containing 5 fabric fragments and 1 weathered bullet, and are labeled as such. Well, we know from the top part of this autopsy report that the bullet is probably not going to be in play here, because there is no injury to the bones, no indication of primordial trauma. Meaning, when the bones are at their softest point, i.e. are alive, there's no indication of trauma to that. So when the tissue of the body breaks down and it disappears and you're left with bones, well, I think it was fascinating that they got in there and they were able to pull out this BAM. Now, this is also important. 1 paper bag containing 4 packets, bugs, meaning they can send that to a botanist and they can figure out potentially where those bugs came from and originated. 2 packets from the hoodie. They got a lot of stuff there. And you'll be surprised what you can get from those types of animals. Sometimes you can nail down the growth patterns and nail down the type of, or the time of general geographic timing of death. This one here I thought was really interesting as well. Three bags contain multiple human and non-human bones and fragments, dirt, and a wood fragment. A wood fragment. All right. From an investigative analysis aspect, where would be the sources of wood fragments? Well, we know that he was chasing chipmunks around the house, or somebody was, based on his phone pings. But we also know that Mallory's door was busted in. We also know, you're correct, Mary, that he carried a shovel, or somebody did. We also know that he removed items from his workbench in the garage. Oh, yeah, we forgot about that. Let me show you that. By coincidence, a coinkydink, Barry was told by SA Special Agent Harris about the needle sheath for the tranquilizer being found in the dryer. He said he had no idea how it got there. It's got nothing to do with me. Barry added, I hate that because, that makes me look bad. S.A. Grusing asked Barry if he shot the tranquilizer gun on Saturday, May 9th. And he said, absolutely not. Barry was told no tranquilizer like BAM was recovered at his house. He said he uses BAM, Telazol, and Exolazine as tranquilizers. Wait a minute. He said he uses BAM? When Barry was asked if he disposed of those, he stated, I don't recall. Barry was asked what he used to reverse the tranquilizer effects, and he says Tolazine. Barry said he bought the chemicals, which he knew to be controlled substances, from Indiana and kept them on his workbench. Barry said he kept the chemicals in vials and injected the chemicals into darts, not using a licensed vet for the process. When asked if he was able to do that all himself, he said, yeah, absolutely. Barry was asked the last time he used those chemicals. He said around the end of April 2020. So let me get this right. In Suzanne's body, in her bones, is BAM. In Barry's statement, he uses BAM. In the attorney's statement, there's no mention of BAM. I don't know what's going on, but the family's quite skeptical about the integrity of this investigation, as the very same investigators that concealed unknown male DNA continue to be involved and were present at the autopsy of Suzanne. But there was caffeine. There was caffeine. So what is it? What does it do? It incapacitates large animals. And you can put it in a series of darts. The wildlife folks know all about it. Zoo folks know all about it. Veterinarians know all about it. Hunters do not use BAM to hunt. They use BAM to incapacitate animals. Well, who would incapacitate animals? I don't know. Let's go to page 120 of the affidavit. And, Barry's been hunting his whole life. And look what he says here. All I have now is my hunting. That's all I have. And I've done it since I was 7 years old. So if I got to live this life without her, I at least want my hunting. And this year I'm going to travel. I'm going to hunt. And it would be nice to have my guns. And I'm confident with the shot many, and I'm confident with and shot many animals and have great confidence in them. And then he asked, be nice to my cameras, i.e. his hunting cameras. I put them up there, they're cell phone cameras, and I can be anywhere in the country and I can get pictures of the deer that I'm hunting. Did you know, Barry, if you haven't seen the piece we did on Barry in my playlist, go check that out. Allegedly, he was listed as a person of interest, and they actually arrested him for homicide. I'm just trying to figure out what the odds are of BAM and Barry saying, quote, he used to use BAM. This is a really unique way of killing somebody. And this is why I think this is going to be really interesting to find out if there's a correlation between this purple medical device, i.e. a dirt-covered medical port. What do medical ports do? They direct line chemicals into the system. Now, the investigators, or Barry, reported at 5 a.m. he left his wife sleeping. And he could tell because she was slightly snoring. Slightly snoring. Well, what does animal tranquilizer do? Well, if you've ever watched TV and you ever watched an animal get shot with a tranquilizing dart, they go into almost an intoxicated state. Their breathing shallows. Could that have the impression of the last impression that he had? Their breathing shallows. So let's say Suzanne, whoever put this BAM into her, was being chased around the house with a dart gun. And a dart gun, by the way, that Barry is very familiar with. In fact, he loads them. And he tells everybody, hey, I know how to do all this stuff. Heck yeah. I know how to do all this stuff. And let's say, hypothetically, there's a 22 caliber dart utilized. And he hits her with a dart, the suspect, whoever that is. And she starts to go. Remember, he used to have a deer farm. And he used to collect and harvest antlers of animals. So he's extremely familiar with how to utilize that chemical. And he also knows how to bring an animal out of it. In fact, he says right here, these are the two chemicals that you utilize to get them out of it. Unfortunately, Suzanne didn't come out of it, whoever administered this chemical. And now, if she's incapacitated briefly, and you have a port that's attached to her body because of chemotherapy, and the suspect hypothetically has a syringe, and there just so happen to be here a needle sheath for the tranquilizer was found in the dryer. He said he had no idea how it got there. It's got nothing to do with me. But then he added, I hate that because, that makes me look bad. He's also not a vet. But if we come back up here, there is a lot of information here that I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all comes together. So here's the research they did on BAM before the test, by the way, i.e. the autopsy. They were looking for this chemical. And lo and behold, it's in her body, in her bones, to the point where the doctors, 5 of them, have specifically said homicide. But they haven't said how it got stuck in there. Meaning, is it the port? Or is it a syringe? Or a dart? But it's BAM, intoxication. Think about that. What are the odds of a beautiful mother, a beautiful woman on Mother's Day? Let's play this through. Decides to go for a bike ride. And she had a cup of coffee that morning. Because, she had caffeine in her system. And all of a sudden, this total stranger, RSO, who left his DNA in her Range Rover, somehow takes her off of her bike and somehow has a mode of transportation to get her in and control her. And it's interesting that they're probably going to say in the next press release at some point, well, and he also put BAM in her. Okay. However, this unknown suspect now decides, you know what, I got to get her away from here. And he goes the opposite direction. And then he changes his mind after throwing items out and goes the other way, 50 miles. And while there, we don't know if the clothing is on her. We know they found clothing, and they also found a mask. So this individual, I love Arctic, Sod, some other dude, decides, you know what? I don't need this mask anymore. I'm just going to leave it here. And I'm going to leave a bullet here. I'm going to leave all the other clothing in here, at least some of it. We don't know if it's all of it yet. And, now all of a sudden, you've got this whole thought process that goes, oh, yeah, that's got to be the guy. That's got to be the guy. Yet you have on the other side of that coin this other guy who uses BAM is seen in a relationship with this person. And, this Christian guy that's not done anything is having an affair with her. And he's mad about an affair from Suzanne. And he's seen on surveillance going to hotels in Colorado Springs on Valentine's Day. He's captured on surveillance footage with Barry carrying Drake's luggage and Drake holding a bouquet of flowers. Barry's cell phone was either off or in airplane mode during a majority of this trip. Go figure. And then, go figure, there's surveillance of them checking into the hotel. Meanwhile, Suzanne is buried. And all of this, now we get down here. Barry told FBI and CBI no evidence exists, which infers he knows what happened to the evidence in the case. So we have to, by the way, here's the airplane mode of his phone. Here's the sneaking up around the house. Here's the broken door in Mallory's room. And isn't it coincidental that in the gravesite is a piece of wood? I am just praying that wood matches this door frame. I'm praying that piece of evidence exists. That's the activity of the truck the night of. This is a breezeway that goes through, cuts through, but the defense will have you read, no, that's impossible. He's out shooting chipmunks. In this particular picture, well, okay, what if this is Suzanne and she's being chased with somebody with a phone, and that she gets chased outside and then ultimately ends up in Mallory's room? Man, that is interesting stuff. Because when we go back here, whoever did this is back here. I'm going to go back. I got to show you this piece of the puzzle. It's confusing for me, He uses a squirrel gun, etc. But this is the one these are the ones that I really think are interesting. Lest we forget, right? Ever learning and never come to a knowledge of the truth? Let's see here. Here's the chipmunk gun. Here's the conversation about the chipmunk gun. Asked if a chipmunk gun was in the car or the truck. He said he said he didn't remember. I don't recall. Yeah. Okay. Did you mount a scope? Oh, yeah. Okay. And so we get into here. This is, I think, really important information here that we must never forget at this point. One, on page 119, which I showed you, Barry admits to utilizing BAM often. And that up here, though, he's seen leaving and destroying evidence. Though we'll call this, can you guys hear Buddy too, by the way? We'll call this trash run number 1 on page 80. Barry was shown a photo of the RTD stop and asked about it. Barry said he pulled over there to GPS the job site. There was a trash can right there, and he just took stuff out of his truck. Barry said whatever he threw away was probably just sitting right there on his seat. Barry said he couldn't tell agents what it was, but it wasn't worth anything, Barry said. It was just junk. Probably wrappers, cans, that type of stuff. Barry was shown a satellite image of the south side of the hotel where his truck was parked. And he said he doesn't remember why he was there. Barry said he was just waiting for someone to come out of the door and go in and get a free breakfast. Agents labeled this as trash run number 2. Barry was shown photos from video surveillance, see below, of him carrying things like, including boots, into the hotel. Barry said he doesn't even remember carrying the boots in the hotel. Boy, he doesn't remember much. Then Barry said he remembered that he took them into the hotel to take the laces out. You know, you got to go into the hotel to take the laces out. Barry said the boots had holes in them, but he wanted to save the laces. So he took them in to take the laces out. Barry was asked about the blue item he was holding, and he said it looked like his swimsuit, and asked if they got it from his trunk. Barry was asked by agents if he remembers what was in the garbage bags. Garbage bag. Barry said it was probably his mail. Barry was also asked about changing his shirt that day, and he said it was hot. Barry was shown photos from the video surveillance and asked about McDonald's trash run. Barry said he was pushing it down because the trash was on the top. He was pushing it down so it would fit. Barry was asked what the small item was that he threw away, and he said he couldn't remember. Barry said he does this all the time. It's just him. I know it looks bad, and it probably looked bad to Joe, but there's nothing there. He was shown a map of the men warehouse parking and asked why he stopped there. Agents asked if he took things to the dumpster. Not to my knowledge. Barry was asked if he took things to the trash, and he replied, I could have. Barry was told he was there for 40 minutes and asked if he remembered what he was doing there. Barry said, I think I was cleaning my truck. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I would probably get crap out of my truck, like I said, which I've done my whole entire life. Barry said, again, that from what he has seen, Suzanne left. And he wants to go to Mexico to find her. Adding that Suzanne doesn't have to go through a border, and wondered if she had $70,000. Well, ladies and gentlemen of a future jury, Suzanne didn't leave. And today's her birthday. And she showed up, sadly, in 3 large paper bags. That's horrible. I pray that justice will be served at some point to whoever did this. The idea of a random stranger with all this DNA stuff. I think people are going to see through it now. And so hopefully justice will be served. Thank you all, each and every one of you, for being part of the interview room. We're grateful. God bless. Have a good night.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.